Welcome to Growing Home, the podcast that helps you take care of the place that means the most to you, your home. I'm your host, Terry Therian, alongside your co-host, Len Giddix. All right, Len, well, we're back with another one. So how are you doing today?
Oh, it's a great day to be alive, my friend.
It is.
And yourself?
It's great, especially, I feel really good after listening to this episode.
I was surprised and amazed by Chicken Soup for the Soul and the story that you brought back.
What I thought of Chicken Soup for the Soul was really just only the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, it is. I mean, it goes much deeper than that. These people really, I guess you have to make it seem real, but these people actually live and feel what they write. They're storytellers. And that's the amazing thing. When you think about it, I'd rather listen to a story than a lecture any day, even if the story is boring.
And that was kind of what, really surprised me was we know the brand. Chicken Soup for the Soul is one of the most recognizable brands, over the last 30 years now almost.
Yeah. And
understanding what the original purpose was of why Chicken Soup for the Soul books were created. And then seeing how Amy Newmark, who our interviews with, how her and her husband have taken it on as like the second generation.
Right.
And continuing the mission.
Even further than the books.
Oh, yeah. Amy talks a little bit about like what Chicken Soup for the Soul is expanding into and all her new endeavors. And it's really impressive of where their vision's going and what they've done with that company.
Well, why don't we listen to it and find out?
Yeah. But before we get there, we do have a grab bag winner for this week.
Another winner?
Yep.
There's always a winner at Mackey's.
There's always a winner. So this week we got an email from Meg from Stanford.
Just an email now.
Just an email.
And that's all we require, right?
That is it.
And how do you do this?
You just email us at podcast@mackeysinc.com. That's PODCAST at mackeysinc.com, MACKEYSINC.com. Just shoot us an email, a note, a question, a concern. Hopefully not a concern. A concern we can help with maybe.
Oh, we have the answer to.
Yeah. If not, we'll find some expert to answer that for us. Len, why don't we pick Meg's prize here?
Reach into the big box?
Into the bag. Watch out for those traps.
Yeah, you know what? If you send in just an email without a question, I'm not going to risk the mousetrap at the bottom of this thing. I'm only going halfway, okay? But there's some great prizes that don't weigh a lot, okay? But the F-150 is down the bottom somewhere. Yeah. Okay, here you go, Terry.
All right. So we have
this is great.
T-shirt from Bonide. So Bonide's probably one of our favorite companies as we've gone through, especially through the spring garden season.
You know what? I like that company. They have a wide array of organic pesticides, in my case, that really work, and I'm a great supporter of them.
Yeah, and a cool company too, right? Started by a family in the early 1900s. And
still American-made, local.
Yep, most of it's made in upstate New York.
Yeah.
Yep, right at their facility there, which they just recently expanded. So great. Meg, thank you so much for your email. And, everybody else out there, send us your emails or questions, podcast@mackeysinc.com. And with that, we'll kick off right into a fantastic interview with Amy Newmark from Chicken Soup for the Soul. So, Amy, welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Growing Home podcast.
It's my pleasure to be here. I would do anything to support you guys.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So, Amy, you're the editor-in-chief and publisher of the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series, and your husband, Bill, is the company's CEO. So it's really a family business.
We are. We're a family business in Connecticut, just like you guys.
Yep.
So that's why we love Mackey's so much. So, yeah, I do work with my husband, and theoretically, he's my boss.
Oh.
Yeah, you probably know how that works in a family business.
Yeah, so I report to my mom and dad, and my brother works right alongside me. So there's definitely that unique dynamic with working with your family day in and day out.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when it's a husband and wife. So I basically run our whole book business, and years ago he would ask to see the covers or learn what my new book ideas were, and now he never asks me anything.
Oh,
I just tell him. But you know what? I mean, our business is doing great. We're up substantially this year, even in, an environment that's not great for book sales.
Yeah.
But we're doing really well, and I think he just trusts me with it. But he also knows that it doesn't really work when a husband is the boss of his wife.
Oh, okay.
And so everybody around here laughs when they see that I report to him because they know.
That's not how it works in reality.
I think they think he reports to me.
Oh, okay. That's how it actually works. Maybe, you can share with me. Like, how, you guys have been working together for so long now. How do you make it work on a day in, day out basis? How does it work at home when, work's always on top of your mind?
Oh, yeah. Well, that's interesting because usually I'm okay with talking about work, even at nights and on weekends, but sometimes I just can't take it. Like last weekend, I was editing a book and he wanted to ask me about something else, and my mind was just totally focused on this book.
Yeah.
So we came up with this thing years ago to handle this problem. So I'm sure you read the Harry Potter series and you know about Voldemort,
Yep.
he who may not be named or whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
So years ago, I said to him, Chicken Soup for the Soul is going to be Voldemort. Chicken Soup for the Soul, nights and weekends, will be he who cannot be named. And I said, either one of us has the right to say Voldemort. So if one of us asks the other one a question about work on nights or weekends, you're allowed to just say Voldemort. So he did this to me this past weekend. He came in holding 3 different memos he wanted to talk to me about. And I just looked at him and I said, Voldemort. And he just looked crushed, but resigned to his fate. And then he just walked away, like with his shoulders slumping. And I was like, good, I'm safe till Monday morning.
Well, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So in 2008, you and your husband bought the Chicken Soup for the Soul book series from the founders, Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. So actually, can you take us back to what was the original purpose of Chicken Soup for the Soul when Jack and Mark created it, and then has that changed to what its purpose is today?
So when it started out, they were both motivational speakers, and it was the early days of this whole self-help industry, and it was when self-help had turned into storytelling, and they would always use stories to illustrate whatever points they were trying to make to their audiences. You can think more positively and then give them a story that illustrated that, or boosting your confidence and give them a story about a real person to illustrate that. Whatever point they were trying to make, whatever advice they were imparting, they would illustrate it with a story, because storytelling is really the way that mankind has best passed on wisdom and culture and advice over, thousands of years, right?
Yeah,
because that's how we learn best. We learn so much better from a story where a real person has an experience we can relate to. Mm-hmm. We learn better than if we had like an essay with like a to-do list at the end of it, or, do these 5 steps to make yourself more self-confident, or whatever the lesson was.
Yeah.
So somebody asked them to put all their stories together into a book, all these true stories they had been telling. Mm-hmm. So they did that, and they created this 101 story book, and they called it Chicken Soup for the Soul, which I think is a great name, because chicken soup worldwide, I researched this at one time, worldwide it's used for its curative powers.
Really?
When people are ill, in every culture that has chickens available, so almost every culture has chickens, they always use chicken soup as a curative thing. So they called it Chicken Soup for the Soul. They created this volume, and then they went out looking for a publisher. And the story they tell is that they were turned down by 143 publishers, but I don't think there were 143 publishers back then. You know how these stories change. I mean, it was 26 years ago. But I'm sure they were turned down by every publisher that they could find. And this was before the internet, so I don't even know how they got a list of publishers. And then they finally found an entity that wasn't really a publisher. It was more of a print shop down in Florida. And that guy printed up a couple of thousand copies for them. They put the books in the trunks of their cars and started taking them to the speeches and selling them at the back of the room after the speech. Yep. And then that guy became their publisher and did a great job, of distributing the book, and Jack and Mark did a great job of publicizing the book. And that first Chicken Soup for the Soul book became a nationwide phenomenon.
Yeah.
And over time, just in the U.S., it has sold more than 8 million copies,
wow,
which is huge for a book.
Yeah.
And so then people ask them, well, could you make a chicken soup for the woman's soul? Could you make a chicken soup for the teenage soul?
Gotcha.
And so it just took off from there, and it became a publishing industry phenomenon. And until the Harry Potter series came along, it was the best-selling series of all time in the publishing industry.
Wow, well, that's pretty good company there.
Yeah. Now, of course, we bought it in 2008 when Jack and Mark decided they were too busy with their motivational speaking careers and all the other kinds of books they were writing.
Yep.
They didn't have time for Chicken Soup for the Soul anymore, and they wanted somebody to come in and take Chicken Soup for the Soul to the next level because they knew it could be so much more. And so they sold the company to us because my husband really had a vision for where he could take this brand name, and I had a vision for where we could take the books and how we could make the books even more relevant and topical and diverse and useful. And so I undertook the relaunch of the book series starting in 2008, and he undertook relaunching the rest of the company and taking the brand elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so over the next few years, we have vastly expanded the business.
Yeah. And I find that fascinating. You know, I read a little bit about your background, which is very diverse, where you've had a long career in finance. You were a corporate executive at a tech company. You have a degree from Harvard in Portuguese and a minor in French. And here you are, you know, brainstorming the future as an editor-in-chief and publisher. How was the transition from that career, the finance and tech career, into publishing?
It is kind of strange, right? Like if you were trying to describe my career in terms of a breed, I'd be a mutt, right? So, yeah, I started out with this very literature-oriented degree, you know, but it was also sociological because I went down to Brazil, and here's the funny thing, and it shows you how life comes back around.
Yeah.
When I was studying Portuguese at Harvard, and they didn't have enough Portuguese courses available to complete a major because I was the only Portuguese major at Harvard, I had to go to Brazil for a semester, and then I had to undertake a research project to support my thesis because to graduate with honors, you had to write a thesis your senior year. So I decided to study popular poetry in northeast Brazil, very esoteric. It was this poverty-stricken area, and I traveled around, which was incredibly weird because there I was, like pale as a ghost, blonde hair down my back, blue eyes that none of them had ever seen.
Right.
I would literally have 50 people standing around me in these little towns I went into, staring at my hair and my eyes and wondering, like, what is this alien creature?
Wow.
Because I was in the middle of, you know, an area where a lot of people were of, you know, the native Brazilian descent,
For
whatever,
sure.
Indian populations,
Yeah.
and they just had never seen anybody who looked like
Right.
me. So it was really strange. It was quite the sight for these people. And anyway, I did that research, and I was collecting stories from regular people. And my thesis was basically a compilation of stories from all these different people that I met in Brazil, and that's how I created my thesis about what was going to happen to this form of popular poetry in northeastern Brazil. And then when I was sitting down, I had never had a resume, and I sat down at age 50 when we bought Chicken Soup for the Soul
Yep.
to write a resume because I needed one, and LinkedIn had come along and all of that. And that was when I realized, oh my gosh, I've already done this. I've already collected stories from regular people and put them together into a book.
Okay.
Right? Because
Yeah,
that's what I did. So anyway, I went from that to being a telecommunications consultant and an industry strategist, writing books about telecommunications, and then went into a finance career as a Wall Street analyst, writing reports about – it's always about writing, though.
Yeah.
I was writing reports about stocks that people should buy or sell, and then joined the management of a startup telecom company, and then was a board member on a lot of different technology company boards. Oh, and ran a hedge fund in the middle of that also. I forgot to mention that. So, yeah, I did all of that, and then all of a sudden I go from, like, two emotions on Wall Street, fear and greed, to like the whole panoply of emotions, right, that you get in the whole human experience, which is now what I write about in Chicken Soup for the